As long as human beings have worn clothing, we've had fashion. While styles might differ across regions and time periods, the existence of fashion trends is one of the few constants within the human experience. Sometimes fashion is beautiful, other times it's ridiculous, and there are even some occasions when it is downright dangerous. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Historidame, and today we're taking a look at some of the weirdest fashion trends throughout history. For our first fashion trend, we're heading all the way back to 9th century Asia, where a bizarre style was gaining popularity among the Japanese aristocracy, known as ohaguro. Ohaguro was a fashion trend where upper-class individuals would dye their teeth jet black, resulting in an appearance that is truly unsettling in comparison to modern-day standards. In ancient Japan, however, black teeth were all the rage, and were considered to be a symbol of beauty. First mentions of teeth blackening can be traced back to the Heian period, appearing somewhere between the 9th and 11th centuries, where it became popular with aristocracy before eventually trickling downwards as a beauty trend that was common for women of all social classes. This practice soon became a coming-of-age tradition for young women, where they would have their teeth blackened once they were engaged to be married. This was done with a dye made from fushiko powder, which was a mixture of iron, ground gallnut, and acetic acid that would be applied to the teeth in order to stain them black. Sometimes the teeth would also be rubbed with the peel of a pomegranate beforehand, in order to provide a better surface for the dye to stick to. Those who completed this routine successfully would be met with a glossy black smile, though the effect would not last for long, and in order to keep the colors even, it would have to be repeated every few days. Though the origins of this trend are still unclear, it is possible that it stems from the fact that objects of deep glossy black were seen to have great beauty. It has also been suggested that ohaguro was loved for its benefit to dental hygiene, with the black dye actually creating a protective layer around the teeth and gums, helping in the prevention of cavities. But the value of teeth blackening was lost on Western foreigners when they visited Japan during the Edo period. After Japan ended its isolation policy in the 1860s, European visitors would be horrified by the beauty trend, with British diplomat Rutherford Alcock describing Japanese women to have, quote, unparalleled preeminence in artificial ugliness over the rest of their sex. He was probably just mad that all his people had rotting teeth. It was partially due to this attitude from Westerners that the Japanese government would ban teeth blackening in its efforts to modernize the country. However, as we'll see with our next trend, Europe was not exactly free from bizarre fashion choices either. Moving over to Europe, our next fashion trend has less to do with personal grooming and more with extreme tastes in clothing. If you're familiar with the song Yankee Doodle, you might remember the phrase, stuck a feather in his hat, and called it macaroni. But good old Yankee Doodle wasn't referring to the pasta shape. Rather, the line was a reference to the men's fashion craze of the 1760s, known as macaroni. In the mid-1700s, men's clothing in England was boring, involving simple styles and dark colors. Macaroni, on the other hand, was a style of decadence, where men had the opportunity to dress just as fancy as women, with large powdered wigs, brightly colored stockings, tight-fitting coats, and bows, buckles, and lace galore. This trend was started by young British nobles, who had just returned from their grand tour. This was a long trip across Europe that was meant to broaden their cultural experiences, similar to upper-middle-class millennials who enjoy backpacking today. These young men would return home with a newfound sense of fashion, and an air of superiority. Kind of like that friend you have that goes on a life-changing vacation and then won't shut up about it. You know the one. It was during their travels that many of these young men developed a taste for a pasta known as macaroni, and feeling rather full of themselves, began recruiting all pasta enjoyers into an organization known as the Macaroni Club. To members of this club, anything trendy could be considered macaroni, not just pasta, and the word soon developed into a synonym for fashionable, most notably associated with their extreme clothing choices. Although not everyone was on board the macaroni train, there were many that despised this trend, seeing macaroni fashions as being overly feminine. And in character to the classic cycle of fashion, it was not long before groups of people began mocking those who participated. Many satirical comics and cartoons were created, making fun of the macaronis, such as those by Mary Darley, who made so many caricature illustrations that eventually her store was known as the Macaroni Print Shop. Pretty soon, macaroni was not a word to mean fashionable, but rather a term that was used to insult men who deviated from cultural norms. As most fashion trends started by the upper classes, however, the downfall of macaroni would not be due to ridicule, but rather just the fact that poor people had begun to catch on. And nothing was more unthinkable than dressing the same as a poor person. Content warning. The following portion of the video might be disturbing for some viewers. If you want to skip ahead, please go to the timecode shown on the screen now. Skipping back over the continent, we return to Asia, this time focusing on an ancient Chinese fashion that is truly disturbing: the lotus shoe. Now at first glance, the lotus shoe seems innocent enough. What's the harm in a pretty silk slipper? But the issue with this shoe comes not with its design, but rather its size, and the terrifying process that Chinese women would have to take in order to fit into them, known as footbinding. You see, during the Tang Dynasty, the hottest beauty trend was not having an elaborate hairstyle or the fanciest makeup. It was tiny feet. In order to achieve this, young girls of all classes would have their feet bound, in a way that would force them into an unnatural shape, thus making the foot appear smaller. This process would begin sometime between the ages of 5 to 7, when the girls' bones were still malleable. The feet would first be soaked in hot water that was mixed with herbs and animal blood, in order to soften and relax them. Then all the toenails would be clipped before the 4 smallest toes were broken, folded down, and bound with cotton bandages. Simultaneously, the ball and heel of the foot would be pushed together and also bound. The result would be a curled shape that could fit into the tiny 5-inch lotus shoes, and ruined feet that would have to be continually bound for the rest of the girl's life. As you can imagine, this practice had extreme consequences. A woman with bound feet could not walk properly, only being able to manage tiny, unbalanced steps. Furthermore, the foot-binding process could cause many complications, such as extreme infection, circulation issues, and spinal problems. All of this resulted in a lack of independence and ability to work, as well as a lifetime of health problems. But this was not enough to deter parents from subjecting their daughters to this process. Foot-binding could actually affect a woman's marriage prospects, with tiny feet being an avenue for lower-class individuals to marry up in rank. This resulted in a balance of sorts, where the eldest daughter would have her feet bound in order to secure a better marriage, while the younger daughters would be spared, so that they could work as servants or on the farm. It wasn't until 1928 that the Chinese government officially declared foot-binding to be a harmful practice, though it actually wouldn't be outlawed until 1949. Even still, it would take many years before the ramifications of this fashion trend finally died out. But luckily, our final fashion trend is a little more lighthearted. Or should I say, lightheaded. The Italian Renaissance is known for many things: famous artwork, beautiful music, and many advances in technology that we are still reaping the benefits of today. One of its lesser-known aspects, however, is the unusual set of beauty standards that was popular during this time. If you look at any collection of 15th century Italian portraits, you may notice that many women depicted share a common egg-like trait. Indeed, during the Renaissance, having a massive forehead that made you look like a hard-boiled egg was a highly sought-after trait. It actually got to the point where some women would artificially recede their hairlines by trimming back hair in order to give the illusion of a larger forehead. Others would hide their hairlines behind caps or jewel-encrusted headdresses. Some would even tweeze their eyebrows in order to give more space to the forehead. For those that were not interested in the time-consuming nature of individually plucking hairs, hair removal mixtures could also be used in order to prevent growth along the hairline. All of this could be done by the woman herself, or by hiring a specialized hairstylist that could lighten or remove the hair along the forehead. But of course, as is the case with any fashion trend enjoyed by women, there were many men who looked down upon it with disdain, especially those in the church. To members of the clergy, participating in the trend of forehead plucking was a sign of vanity and pride, and they took great measures to lecture any tweezing individuals that they were knee-deep in sin. But there was only so much that could be done. After all, the church insisted that women cover their hair, and the hairline could be easily hidden beneath any head coverings worn. Other forehead haters, like Geoffrey de la Tour Landry, attempted to dissuade women from participating in the trend through his written works, like the Book of the Knight of the Tower, which was an etiquette manual that included a story of a woman being damned to hell for removing the hair from her forehead. Very harsh. But of course, with changing times, the desire for a high forehead would eventually fall out of fashion. Now all that we have to immortalize it are the many egg-headed paintings and a few cautionary tales. And that brings us to the end of our historical fashion journey. Which of these trends surprised you the most? If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like or a comment down below. If you want to see more content like this, you can also subscribe to my channel and keep up to date on all the fun history videos of the future. But for now, I bid you farewell.